Hey everybody, welcome back to another EFMP Stories. This is Jen Barnhill. I'm the Director of Public Relations for Partners in Promise, and I'm here with amazing, talented author, mom, military spouse, rock star, Marla Bautista, and thank you so much for joining us today. If you recognize her, I mean, she's been on the cover of magazines, and she's a writer inside those magazines as well. Thank you so much for coming, but she also has a story to share today with us about her family. So we'll get to know her a little bit. But Marla, can you just tell us a little bit about your military spouse, military connected journey and kind of how you got involved in this space?
Yes. So I'm Marla Bautista. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me. I am an Army wife of 12, almost 13 years. My husband's been in the Army almost 17, a little over 17 years, actually. And so I've been there through 12 years of the journey. And we have three amazing children, my 10-year-old Ulysses Jr., my 8-year-old daughter, Tylin, and my 5-year-old Christian. And so currently we are living in Tampa, Florida at MacDill Air Force Base. So we're super excited to be here. And Army life has taken us all over the world. So it's a new adventure every time we move, and we love it, honestly.
And I know, because you're a writer, in many different avenues. What are some of the places that people might have seen you before? Because, I think I became your LinkedIn friend before we ever met, virtually. so I know you're pretty active in our community. What are some of the things that you're into right now?
Right now, as far as me being a writer, that's kind of my trade. I do that for a living. I write for Military Families Magazine, Military Spouse Magazine, We Are the Mighty, a lot of different publications in the military space. I also have written for publications outside of the military space, such as NASCAR, What to Expect, Bold Magazine, which is fashion. So I just love writing. That's kind of my thing. I've done it since I was a child. That's kind of my favorite thing to do. But I also have a nonprofit, which is the Bautista Project, which is a nonprofit organization that provides for homeless community members.
Awesome. So I know as a writer myself, I think that we have this like storytelling in our bodies. It's just part of it. And so you hear other people's stories throughout reporting and writing. And that's one of the things that we really love at Partners in Promise is storytelling. And so one of those things I would love for you to share is your story that you maybe, don't share as often, your connection to the special education world.
Well, thanks so much. So, as far as my family, we are an exceptional military family. My son, Ulysses Jr., is 10-year-old, and he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and ADHD, and sensory processing disorder. So, we are definitely an exceptional family with exceptional needs, that's for sure. And I don't talk about it very often, just because in my family, he's just a normal kid. He's always just been a normal kid to us because he's in our family. And a lot of people with people who are EFMP in their family also kind of feel the same way. They're just a part of our family. They're our family member. We don't see them as having that disorder or that disability because we live with it every day. So it's just how that person interacts with us. Every moment is exciting. Cringe-worthy for sure. And it's just like that sums up our lives as an exceptional family. Junior is very smart, he's very clever, he's witty, but he's also got autism, and so sometimes it's a little difficult for him to navigate the big kid world. At the age of 2, we lived in Germany at the time. So he was diagnosed by a developmental pediatrician there in Landstuhl, Germany. The reason he was diagnosed was because I had noticed that he had some eating issues when he was younger. He didn't like to eat anything except for like pureed sweet potato baby food. That's the only thing he would eat. Or chips, crunchy, the baby Cheetos that dissolve in your mouth. He would eat those in the sweet potato baby food. And so the doctors were saying, all through growing up, he was really chunky. So, hey, don't worry about it. He's super chunky. We're not seeing a problem with his eating. So not really a big deal to us. And then he turned about 9 months and he was saying, mama, dada, all the normal stuff. But then when we got to about a year and a half, after we moved to Germany when he turned 1, and he got to about a year and a half, and he stopped talking. He wasn't saying any new words. It was still mama, dada, and a lot of babbling. And he still didn't eat any new foods. And so I was beginning to become concerned because now he's walking and he's a lot more energetic than he used to be. So he slimmed down a lot. And so I was pretty concerned about that. And so when I took him to the doctors, I realized that, there's a questionnaire that you fill out to say whether you have is he sitting up? What age was he sitting up? What age was he eating and standing up and walking and all of these things? And so, I'm putting all the normal stuff, but then you get to that chunk where it's his age level stuff, which is like, is he saying 5 to 10 words? Is he eating a variety of foods and this and that? Then I began checking no. And I was really concerned about that. And so when we got into the doctor's office, they said, we feel like he has some developmental issues that we want to further test. And so the first thing they did was test his hearing to make sure that he was hearing properly, so that they knew that that wasn't a reason why he wasn't responding to his name and following directions. So we got that out of the way, and his hearing came back fine. He had a normal hearing test. He passed it. And so then they wanted to test further for his speech. And so we began doing all of these other tests, and they started us with, I don't know if the program still exists, but EDIS. It was an early intervention type program where you can have someone come to your home, and it was like a therapy type situation. And so we started doing that, and we started doing a lot of play therapy and things like that. And so we realized that he was having some social interaction issues. And so they set us up for the big appointment, which was the 2-day long developmental pediatrician appointment. So we went down to Landstuhl, which was about an hour from our home in Heidelberg, Germany. And we stayed there for 2 days, and we did the first round of testing the first day, and then the second day was the second round of testing, and then the diagnosis. And so that's when the doctor came back and said that she felt like he had autism and he had sensory processing disorder, and that was what was leading him to regurgitate his food because he didn't like the textures of it. And he also had issues wearing shoes and clothing. But so over time, he became verbal. He was nonverbal. So around about late 2, early 3 years old, he began talking. And so he started progressing slowly with the words, doing the 2-word sentences like juice, please, and things like that. And I'm okay with that. At first, I was stressing about it. I wanted him, I guess, so much so to just be regular or to be normal. And I know that's hard for any parent, especially, upon the immediate diagnosis. We were kind of stressing about it. I was kind of overwhelmed with that feeling of, okay, what to do now? My son was diagnosed with autism. Is he going to be okay? What does this look like? I had a friend whose son also had autism, and we are the polar opposites when it comes to this, because she is definitely all about finding out the newest, hottest medical autistic kids. And I am like, my son's fine. He can do whatever. He can go to school, and I'm fine. And that's how we've always lived our life. And I felt like for me and my family, that way was better for us because we incorporated him into our family as if he's just a normal child.
Yeah.
And I believe that has helped him progress socially because we treat him normally. But he still definitely has a lot of delays. At the age of 10 years old, he's about around the cognitive age of 6, about 6 or 7 at the latest. So he's definitely got a lot of growing to do, but he's fine just the way that he is. And believe me, if he wants something, he can figure out a way to do that with you. But I think we potty trained. We finally finished the potty training fight at about 6 years old.
Mhm.
So that was another difficult aspect. Something that I wasn't aware of was going to be an issue when parenting. So as I write for What to Expect, that was actually the
Mhm.
book I read. When you're pregnant, What to Expect was an amazing, like, detailed way to raise a kid, right? To be
Mhm.
pregnant. I mean, it gave you everything. And so I read that book cover to cover. Like, I'm a perfect parent. I can do this,
Yeah.
and then you come up and your child's different. And it's like, okay, what do I do now? This is hard. This was not in the book. This absolutely, there was no tab for if your kid is diagnosed with autism, do this, turn to page 5 or,
Mhm.
and so that was a little difficult initially for me. But like I said, over time, we kind of grew with him and he grew with us. And it works out fine. It's pretty fun. A lot of times, we're on the verge of, either being on like a crazy YouTube channel for the fun family or, on the verge of being in jail. I don't know.
So you said earlier, you know, and I think this resonates with many parents who find themselves in a similar situation, is you want your child to be normal. And I know that, and you're saying that from a very honest perspective, and I appreciate that. I think that we want that at all levels for our kid, because you don't want them to be teased. You want to have, sometimes when you're a parent, you just want something to be easy,
Yes.
and easy for them and for the family. So what was something that, I mean, it sounds like you're a very much roll with the flow, kind of person. Military is similar too. But was there anything that kind of helped you kind of get away from that mentality of like, it's okay for him to be who he is, not to be what everyone perceives as normal?
I think honestly, the burden of appearing normal, that was really hard for my family, because we're just really close knit, and we feel each other. We're empathetic here, and so when he's going through something, it's kind of hard for us not to go through that with him. And so I think that the burden of just appearing normal, it was just too much. And like you said, I just want to be honest about it, because this is real life. This is my real life things. No, I didn't get a handbook in autism before I got pregnant. I had no idea that this was something that my family would encounter, because we don't think about those things. And so it was just a big burden. About 2 or 3 years old, toddler age, is like, okay, fine, he's acting out, right? We all say that that's the good age to do that. But then you're progressing into that 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old, and it's like, okay, and so we had to accept the fact that, hey, Junior's different, he has autism, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. And people around us may not understand him, but we do. And as long as we advocate for him and understand him, then he's okay. We want people to understand him. We want the world to understand. But if the world doesn't, we want to make sure that he at least knows that he's not ostracized, that there are people that actually love him and that will always support him no matter how he acts or, what he does. That's when you just have to learn that either you're going to die inside
Mm-hmm.
or you're going to flourish. Those are your two options. um, and if you die inside, you're going to have a miserable life. You're going to be miserable. Your family's going to be miserable. But if you embrace your child for who they are, and also let that child be who they are to the world will also embrace them. And I think,
Yeah.
like, everybody that Junior encounters now, they love him and they think he's the funniest comedian ever. I'm like, they're
Yeah.
like, not have a YouTube show. I'm like, can't. I just can't.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a lot to juggle, but I appreciate that. And I think that, as we started saying earlier, the storytelling and telling stories is one way, especially within the military community, who maybe there's that stereotype of that strong, brave face, and there's a lot of strength is readiness. You're not ready if you're not strong. And there's a lot that we're hearing in our community. More people are hesitant to enroll in EFMP if they didn't even know that it is something that you're supposed to do. And we want people to understand that, in order to get to a place where people feel more comfortable, they have to share their stories, and they have to hear stories, and honest stories like yours. So one of the other things and we want to take that information and obviously help make things better. So we're, and for Partners in Promise, our focus is on helping connect military children to receive the proper, free, and appropriate public education that is entitled to them by law. But then sometimes it's hard to come by when the military lifestyle enters into the situation. So I wonder, how has your school experience been, and positives, negatives? I know you said like you were Army family on an Air Force base. What is that like? Is there anything different there?
I did see a difference with DoD schools when we were in Germany. My son did go to elementary school. He started there. And I really liked it there. They were really attentive to his needs. They had the proper amount of professionals that he needed, whether it was a paraprofessional and all the therapists that he needed, they were all available. So honestly, that was a really good experience. We moved to Fort Carson, Colorado, and I'm going to speak about it because I feel like, again, this helps all of us. Moving to Fort Carson was a great experience for us. Colorado Springs had the most amazing therapist there. The school district was amazing. I believe we're in District 8, I want to say. He went to school on post at Fort Carson, and I loved all of his teachers, and they loved him. And even to this day, I am still connected with those teachers. They really just, they went to bat for him. They went to bat for Junior. They wanted the best for him. And that is hard to come by, especially in our community. We don't know where we're going to end up. We've been in so many places, and we've experienced so many different school districts, but definitely Colorado Springs was one of the best places that we've been. Their care was phenomenal. He received feeding therapy there at the hospital. He received ABA, OT, and speech as well, and everyone was just on top of everything, and they watched his progress, and they constantly provided me with feedback on the regular basis that I could understand. And that was something that was important for me, because I'm not trained in this. I didn't get a handbook, and I didn't go to college for having him. I just had him, and that was it. And it was like, you're his mom. I'm not an expert, and I tell people this all the time because they're confusing, me, because I'm an autism mom, with I should be an autism expert. I am not. I did not go to school for this. This is my child, and I raised him, and I'm pretty sure I'm not a perfect mom. When we first moved to Fort Drum, not so funny story. First day of school, they had to translate his IEP. I had gave it to the school in July. School started in September there in New York, and we gave them the IEP in July, and they didn't have it done in time for school. So what they said was, we'll go ahead and just put him on a general school bus, a regular school bus, with all the regular, kids and everything, and then he'll just go to a gen ed classroom until we get this thing sorted. I was like, you cannot. There's no way you can. My son has never been in a gen ed classroom ever. And he doesn't even know like where to go and what to do. Like he wouldn't even understand. He wouldn't even begin to understand what to do, especially like on a school bus, because he's used to having a smaller school bus capacity with like a bus driver and 2 aides on the bus. And then each kid is in their own seat with their seatbelt or harness on. And I'm like, so you're saying you want my son to go sit on the school bus on the seat by himself? You're just going to drive to school and then he's just going to get off and go wherever he's supposed to go? I'm like, okay, so set up, that's not going to happen. I was like, so in my mind, of course, I'm mommy freaking out here. Because I'm like,
advocate. You're an advocate. Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't do this. Like I wanted to try it, but in my head, I'm like, this is just gonna be horrible. I'm like, my son doesn't even know where to go. And so, that whole thing started boiling up inside of me. And so I would drive him to school. And then they put him in a gen ed classroom, of course. And the teacher every single day for the first 2 weeks he was in school. I picked him up every single day, about an hour, 2 hours into school. I was at my absolute wit's end. I was at my wit's end. I said, I can't keep doing this. I have a job. I need to work, and I cannot pick him up every day from school until you guys get his IEP sorted out. I gave it to you 3 months prior to school even starting, or 2 months prior to school starting. I assumed you guys would have this taken care of. Absolutely not. So we go through the entire school year. He got put into a 12-1-3 classroom, and he kind of just hung out all day. Never got homework, never got anything, never gotten a report card ever. And until we moved here in this past semester in Florida, and we haven't even been here a year, and he's gotten a report card. And that was actually the hardest thing for me as a mom of a child with special needs, because he never had an actual, like, they give you like an IEP progress up and things like that, but he got an actual school district report card, and everything was like below average, and I'm like, how are we supposed to do this? So a few of the things that I experienced that were horrible, not great in school, was that I need to bring up are advocating for testing. I had no idea that I needed to opt out of testing, standardized testing for my son. I had no idea. Because my son was in a special needs classroom, I assumed that he wouldn't be taking a standardized test. So I asked, they called me and they said that he was having issues. And I said, well, what did you do? And they said, well, legally, we can only give him the test, and that's it, and hand him his pencil. I'm like, well, what did he do? Well, he broke the pencil and ripped the test in half. So then the next time you can opt out of all the tests, I believe, except for one. I think it was math. You can't opt out of or something, they told me. And so what happened was, now they got accommodations for the test. So he was allowed accommodations for the test. The accommodations read that he can have someone read the test instructions to him, and they can also read each question to him. But he was still responsible for filling out his own answers. Also didn't work. Finally, we were able to, kind of battle it out. And I was able to opt him out of future testing. And again, we went back to normal, no report cards, no anything grade level. So we just finished out our time there. And then, of course, we move again here to Florida, and they need to translate his IEP once again. And so we did that, and he started in a classroom that is a mixed grade that had third and fourth graders in it. And it was about 4 students and 2 teachers. And the teachers were phenomenal. They were absolutely phenomenal. And this was all before COVID. So we also ended up in the midst of the COVID thing. But they were absolutely phenomenal. And they were actually teaching him things, which, as a parent, we kind of all expect that, especially for our normal functioning kids. We're like, we expect them to teach our children things. But on the contrary, as a special needs mom, I'm used to Junior just hanging out at school all day. I'm not used to, them giving him an actual education. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth. He had therapy, so he'd go to speech therapy, he'd go to OT therapy, he'd go to lunch and things like that, but there was never really much academics. There weren't a lot of academic requirements placed on him. And so coming here, it was different. They're like, no, we learn here, and special needs children also have to learn. And so I was like, okay, great, I'm all for it. But then, like I said, seeing his report card for the first time ever at the age of 10 was kind of heartbreaking. Because I'm like, is this what's going to happen to my baby? Like, it's not that he doesn't deserve this, but he doesn't. And so just to see it, seeing everything below average, was like, what can I do? And so that's kind of where we're at now. We're at the place of what can we do? COVID made us retreat to our homes and start virtual learning, which also was not our thing, for sure. And so because they're requiring him to learn here, I was required to sit with him and make sure he, watched his teacher on a laptop for an hour-long video of, the.
How has that worked? As I mean, everyone with COVID, it's very hard with students and at home. Regardless, we're not even going into the distance versus in person or whatever. But when it comes to being a person who's working, like what does that look like for you?
It's definitely been a juggling fest, that's for sure. Luckily for me, I am a remote worker, so it's been a little easier for me, I'm assuming, than a traditional worker. But my husband is a traditional, I guess not really traditional, but he's a soldier. So now he's soldiering from the phone from home, teleworking, and so has honestly that's been harder. With the conference calls and everything. So he's got conference calls, I've got conference calls.
Yeah.
All the kids have schooling. And so my daughter, she's 8 years old. She can just flip open the laptop. She knows what to do. Her teacher gets on her Zoom calls a couple of times a week. They did Zoom calls twice a week. And so she knows how to do it herself, and she's okay with that. And so she was okay, which helped us out a lot with Junior. So then we could devote more time to watching Junior. So there was a point where, I mean, we had so much work. The teacher was texting and emailing and putting in the little school chat, all this work. And I quit. Yeah. I was like, I can't do this anymore. For about 2 weeks, I absolutely did not do schoolwork with him. I had so many work conferences where I was speaking at them. And so I'm preparing speeches and I'm doing my writing articles. And then, I'm also cooking and cleaning. And then my husband's, juggling teleworking, and then the other children. And we're trying to keep everybody quiet in the midst of all of this. And it just kind of blew up, and I threw my hands up and I said, I'm done. In about 2 weeks, the teacher, she called and she said, hey, is there anything that I can do? Because this isn't easy for any of us. And she said, honestly, I'd prefer to be with your son at school right now, because this is hard for me. Being a teacher of his kind, I am able to, have that hands-on experience with my children. And she's like, I don't have that. Those are my kids. And she's like, I'm missing them. And it's really hard because now we've got all these kids with special needs on a Zoom call with the teacher. And it was just a mess. And she's such an angel, because she literally just tried and tried and tried. And just to know that, like, it was just really hard to even watch her, because she honestly, you can see how defeated she felt doing this day after day after day. So it was just definitely difficult for all of us, not just at home, but I'm sure for those teachers of special needs kiddos too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been the universal story that we're hearing and reading and researching. I said in our webinar that we were on together with Military Families magazine last week, the thing that surprised me the most is in doing some reporting, I spoke with a high-level organization about what military kids could expect as far as special education. And unfortunately, when it comes to special education, even though no one's going to go, I mean, they were on the record, they said it on the record, but that it's not expected to be realistic to be able to maintain a normal IEP outside of the classroom. So it's hard, and our families are hurting. And I thank you so much for sharing with us today. And I would love it, do you have any other tips and tricks before we say goodbye that you'd like to share with our community about lessons learned, or just some things that have encouragement or anything like that?
I actually do. So a couple things. Remember, your kid is normal. Your kid is fine. Do the best that you can. This is an emotionally taxing time for all of us, but for special needs parents, it's a lot harder. Definitely just take your time and be okay. And when I say be okay, take an emotional account of how you're feeling, of how your kids are feeling. School is important. but it's not as important as your health and as your child's health. I think that's a big lesson that I had to learn, because I was overspent. Another thing is, as we're gearing to go back to school, definitely practice wearing your mask. And if you have kiddos like mine who have sensory issues, the paper masks seem to work better because they're lighter. And so having those in stock may help, but definitely practice wearing them. Get your kid used to wearing it, playing with it. Have them pick out their own mask. You can go to Walmart and get those little sheets where you can iron on a design. You can put them through the printer, print something off your printer and stick it on a mask, iron it onto a mask, and let your kid have that sense of ownership. And that would help them want to keep their mask. That's definitely something that's truly helped us. Also snacks, lots of snacks. Snacks are fine. That's definitely one way we've gotten through this time. You know what? It's like you said, it's hard, it's difficult, and we know that our kids' education is not the top priority during this time, and it's sad. But we need to make sure that our families are okay.
Yeah, and bottom line, even though the education piece is really hard right now, and we're still fighting, we're fighting for that. We want to. At Partners in Promise, we want to find other ways so that when something like this happens in the future, that it's not just like, well, I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to take what you get. We hope that we can work towards fixes, that this won't be the normal moving forward. But until that point, we just want everyone to know that you are not alone. Obviously we're sharing these stories. We want to hear your stories, other things, other experiences you have. And by coming together and talking about it, hopefully we can kind of just be there for each other and support each other just by listening. It's hard, like you said. But thank you so much, Marla, for talking with us today and for sharing your tips and tricks. I love the mask preparation. I think that we're going to be wearing masks for years in some form or fashion. So it's definitely a good tip for kids, and especially those with special needs who maybe need that practice. So that's really wonderful, helpful tip. But
Well,
thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much.